have been on their cover like 14 or 15 times. I think we have the all-time record in the history of Time magazine.
The audience was the biggest ever, but this crowd was massive. Look how far back it goes. This crowd was massive. I guess it was the biggest electoral college win since Ronald Reagan.
Obamacare covers very few people.
The fake media goes, Donald Trump has changed his stance on China. I haven't changed my stance.
Now, the Paris Agreement, they all say it's non-binding. Like hell, it's non-binding.
From the trivial to the important, those are just some of the lies that the New York Times included in its massive new list of every lie Donald Trump has told in the first 154 days of the Trump presidency. The list of Trump lies filled an entire page of the New York Times, yesterday's print edition of the New York Times. It includes only what the Times calls demonstrably false statements. The Times reports that Donald Trump publicly told a lie on 20 of his first 40 days in office, when the Times used what it called a broader standard, one that includes his many misleading statements. It found that he said something untrue every day for the first 40 days of his presidency, and on 74 out of 113 days after that. An example of what the Times called misleading was the president exaggerating military spending in the Middle East. Joining us now, Stuart Thompson, who co-wrote the piece on Trump's lies. He is the graphics director for the opinion section of the New York Times. And Stuart, first of all, thank you, because just right on one piece of paper, I can just carry around the first, I don't know, few hundred days. So this we have to hope is a recurring feature of the New York Times every 2-3 months, something like that, please.
It might be,
You can raise my subscription personally to cover whatever this costs, okay? Yeah. I will personally kick that in. Where did the idea come from to put it all down?
Well, David Leonhardt, columnist in the New York Times, had written about lies several times, and he included in one of his columns a paragraph where he listed a bunch of lies. And I talked to him about that and thought maybe if we, looked at the whole universe of statements that he made, we could put together a big list and sort of give a nice gestalt view of the entire list of lies that he's made since his inauguration.
This is an especially fascinating moment for me, because I have been saying Trump and lie in the same sentence since, I guess, 2011, when he first opened his mouth about the president's birth certificate. The rest of the news media was very, very reluctant to do that. The New York Times did not say the word lie with the word Trump until September of 2016. Is that correct?
Sounds right.
Yeah. So like basically in the closing section of the presidential campaign. Are there any regrets at the Times about that? I mean, I understand the struggle that the major newspapers went through on this question, but I noticed at that time, New York Times, LA Times, everybody kind of broke out at the same time, it seems like.
Yeah, it seemed like there was a bit of a tonal shift in the coverage around that time. I think what's unique about this piece is that it's an opinion piece, and it's the subjective view of David and I to evaluate those claims. But we have seen the news section call occasionally, they'll call something a lie, but we can use a sort of broader standard.
Right. But this also could have been done during the campaign. I mean, at any point during the campaign for the last month, this could have been done.
Yeah, definitely, and we only picked it up since the inauguration. But we got a lot of comments from people saying, you could extend that back, like you said, back to the birther movement. And
what was the response to this? It went online. This appears in the Sunday opinion section, so in print appears yesterday. But I think I first saw it on Friday. Yeah,
it went up on Friday afternoon, and very quickly was I think it was the top article all weekend, top opinion piece, and yeah, it was a very, very popular thing on social media as well.
And when you and David studied this, were there moments where you just started to be, you probably thought you knew what you were getting into? Did your understanding of what you were doing change by the time you got to the end of it?
Yeah, it was difficult to put together, and we had over 400 false statements that we were able to fact check, and we had to cull that list down, and that took a lot of debate to really decide what we thought was qualified as a lie versus just some kind of falsehood.
When you came across something where you thought, well, he might believe this, it's completely wrong, the Earth is flat, but he might believe the Earth is flat, what would you do with one of those?
Yeah, I think that's sort of a theme of his lying. He doesn't necessarily know what the facts are, but in a traditional lie, you sort of willfully deceive people. But he's pretty flippant with the truth, so I think we were able to categorize a lot of those as lies.
Stuart Thompson, it's public service. Trump lies. We've got to keep it going. And as I say, whatever you want to do to my personal subscription price to keep this going, go ahead. Thank you very much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Trump's Lies 100 Lies List. Many Americans have become accustomed to President Trump's lies. But as regular as they have become, the country should not allow itself to become numb to them. So we have catalogued nearly every outright lie he has told publicly since taking the oath of office. By David Leonhardt and Stuart A. Thompson, June 23, 2017. Jump to story below. January 21. I wasn't a fan of Iraq. I didn't want to go into Iraq. He was for an invasion before he was against it. January 21. A reporter for Time magazine, and I have been on their cover 14 or 15 times. I think we have the all-time record in the history of Time magazine. Trump was on the cover 11 times and Nixon appeared 55 times. January 23. Between 3 million and 5 million illegal votes caused me to lose the popular vote. There's no evidence of illegal voting. January 25. Now, the audience was the biggest ever. But this crowd was massive. Look how far back it goes. This crowd was massive. Official aerial photos show Obama's 2009 inauguration was much more heavily attended. January 25. Take a look at the Pew reports, which show voter fraud. The report never mentioned voter fraud. January 25. You had millions of people that now aren't insured anymore. The real number is less than 1 million, according to the Urban Institute. January 25. So, look, when President Obama was 2 weeks ago making a speech, very nice speech. 2 people were shot and killed during his speech. You can't have that. There were no gun homicide victims in Chicago that day. January 26. We've taken in tens of thousands of people. We know nothing about them. They can say they vet them. They didn't vet them. They have no papers. How can you vet somebody when you don't know anything about them and you have no papers? How do you vet them? You can't. Vetting lasts up to 2 years. January 26. I cut off hundreds of millions of dollars off one particular plane, hundreds of millions of dollars in a short period of time. It wasn't like I spent, weeks, hours, less than hours, and many, many hundreds of millions of dollars. And the plane's going to be better. Most of the cuts were already planned. January 28. The coverage about me in the New York Times and the Washington Post has been so false and angry that the Times actually apologized to its dwindling subscribers and readers. It never apologized. January 29. The Cuban Americans, I got 84% of the vote. There is no support for this. January 30. Only 109 people out of 325,000 were detained and held for questioning. Big problems at airports were caused by Delta computer outage. At least 746 people were detained and processed, and the Delta outage happened 2 days later. February 3. Professional anarchists, thugs and paid protesters are proving the point of the millions of people who voted to make America great again. There is no evidence of paid protesters. February 4. After being forced to apologize for its bad and inaccurate coverage of me after winning the election, the fake news at New York Times is still lost. It never apologized. February 5. We had 109 people out of hundreds of thousands of travelers and all we did was vet those people very, very carefully. About 60,000 people were affected. February 6. I have already saved more than $700 million when I got involved in the negotiation on the F-35. Much of the price drop was projected before Trump took office. February 6. It's gotten to a point where it is not even being reported. And in many cases, the very, very dishonest press doesn't want to report it. Terrorism has been reported on, often in detail. February 6. The failing at New York Times was forced to apologize to its subscribers for the poor reporting it did on my election win. Now they are worse. It didn't apologize. February 6. And the previous administration allowed it to happen because we shouldn't have been in Iraq, but we shouldn't have gotten out the way we got out. It created a vacuum. ISIS was formed. The group's origins date to 2004. February 7. And yet the murder rate in our country is the highest it's been in 47 years, right? Did you know that? 47 years. It was higher in the 1980s and 90s. February 7. I saved more than $600 million. I got involved in negotiation on a fighter jet, the F-35. The Defense Department projected this price drop before Trump took office. February 9. Chris Cuomo, in his interview with Senator Blumenthal, never asked him about his long-term lie about his brave service in Vietnam. Fake news. It was part of Cuomo's first question. February 9. Senator Richard Blumenthal now misrepresents what Judge Gorsuch told him. The Gorsuch comments were later corroborated. February 10. I don't know about it. I haven't seen it. What report is that? Trump knew about Flynn's actions for weeks. February 12. Just leaving Florida. Big crowds of enthusiastic supporters lining the roads that the fake news media refuses to mention. Very dishonest. The media did cover it. February 16th we got 306 because people came out and voted like they've never seen before, so that's the way it goes. I guess it was the biggest electoral college win since Ronald Reagan, George H.W. Bush, Bill Clinton and Barack Obama all won bigger margins in the electoral college. February 16th, that's the other thing that was wrong with the travel ban. You had Delta with a massive problem with their computer system at the airports. Delta's problems happened 2 days later. February 16th, Walmart announced it will create 10,000 jobs in the United States just this year because of our various plans and initiatives. The jobs are a result of its investment plans announced in October 2016. February 16th, when WikiLeaks, which I had nothing to do with, comes out and happens to give, they're not giving classified information. Not always. They have released classified information in the past. February 16th, we had a very smooth rollout of the travel ban. But we had a bad court. Got a bad decision. The rollout was chaotic. February 16th, they're giving stuff. What was said at an office about Hillary cheating on the debates? Which, by the way, nobody mentions. Nobody mentions that Hillary received the questions to the debates. It was widely covered. February 18th, and there was no way to vet those people. There was no documentation. There was no nothing. Refugees receive multiple background checks, taking up to 2 years. February 18th, you look at what's happening in Germany, you look at what's happening last night in Sweden. Sweden, who would believe this? Trump implied there was a terror attack in Sweden, but there was no such attack. February 24th, by the way, you folks are in here, this place is packed, there are lines that go back 6 blocks. There was no evidence of long lines. February 24th, ICE came and endorsed me. Only its union did. February 24th, Obamacare covers very few people, and remember, deduct from the number all of the people that had great health care that they loved that was taken away from them, it was taken away from them. Obamacare increased coverage by a net of about 20 million. February 27th, since Obamacare went into effect, nearly half of the insurers are stopped and have stopped from participating in the Obamacare exchanges. Many fewer pulled out. February 27th, on one plane, on a small order of one plane, I saved $725 million. And I would say I devoted about, if I added it up, all those calls, probably about an hour. So I think that might be my highest and best use. Much of the price cut was already projected. February 28th, and now, based on our very strong and frank discussions, they are beginning to do just that. NATO countries agreed to meet defense spending requirements in 2014. February 28th, the EPA's regulators were putting people out of jobs by the hundreds of thousands. There's no evidence that the waters of the United States rule caused severe job losses. February 28th, we have begun to drain the swamp of government corruption by imposing a 5-year ban on lobbying by executive branch officials. They can't lobby their former agency but can still become lobbyists. March 3rd, it is so pathetic that the Dems have still not approved my full cabinet. Paperwork for the last 2 candidates was still not submitted to the Senate. March 4th, terrible. Just found out that Obama had my wires tapped in Trump Tower just before the victory. Nothing found. This is McCarthyism. There's no evidence of a wiretap. March 4th, how low has President Obama gone to tap my phones during the very sacred election process? This is Nixon, Watergate. Bad, or sick, guy. There's no evidence of a wiretap. March 7th, 122 vicious prisoners, released by the Obama administration from Gitmo, have returned to the battlefield. Just another terrible decision. 113 of them were released by President George W. Bush. March 13th, I saved a lot of money on those jets, didn't I? Did I do a good job? More than $725 million on them. Much of the cost cuts were planned before Trump. March 13th, first of all, it covers very few people. About 20 million people gained insurance under Obamacare. March 15th, on the airplanes, I saved $725 million. Probably took me a half an hour if you added up all of the times. Much of the cost cuts were planned before Trump. March 17th, I was in Tennessee. I was just telling the folks, and half of the state has no insurance company, and the other half is going to lose the insurance company. There's at least one insurer in every Tennessee county. March 20th, with just one negotiation on one set of airplanes, I saved the taxpayers of our country over $700 million. Much of the cost cuts were planned before Trump. March 21st, to save taxpayer dollars, I've already begun negotiating better contracts for the federal government, saving over $700 million on just one set of airplanes, of which there are many sets. Much of the cost cuts were planned before Trump. March 22nd, I make the statement, everyone goes crazy. The next day they have a massive riot, and death, and problems. Riots in Sweden broke out 2 days later and there were no deaths. March 22, NATO, obsolete, because it doesn't cover terrorism. They fixed that. It has fought terrorism since the 1980s. March 22, well, now, if you take a look at the votes, when I say that, I mean mostly they register wrong, in other words, for the votes. They register incorrectly and or illegally and they then vote. You have tremendous numbers of people. There's no evidence of widespread voter fraud. March 29, remember when the failing at New York Times apologized to its subscribers, right after the election, because their coverage was so wrong. Now worse. It didn't apologize. March 31, we have a lot of plants going up now in Michigan that were never going to be there if I didn't win this election. Those plants would never even think about going back. They were gone. These investments were already planned. April 2, and I was totally opposed to the war in the Middle East, which I think finally has been proven. People tried very hard to say I wasn't, but you've seen that it is now improving. He was for an invasion before he was against it. April 2 now, my last tweet, you know, the one that you are talking about, perhaps, was the one about being, in quotes, wiretapped, meaning surveilled. Guess what? It is turning out to be true. There is still no evidence. April 5, you have many states coming up where they're going to have no insurance company. Okay. It's already happened in Tennessee. It's happening in Kentucky. Tennessee only has half coverage. Half the state is gone. They left. Every marketplace region in Tennessee had at least one insurer. April 6, if you look at the kind of cost-cutting we've been able to achieve with the military and at the same time ordering vast amounts of equipment, saved hundreds of millions of dollars on airplanes, and really billions, because if you take that out over a period of years it's many billions of dollars. I think we've had a tremendous success. Much of the price cuts were already projected. April 11, I like Steve, but you have to remember he was not involved in my campaign until very late. I had already beaten all the senators and all the governors, and I didn't know Steve. He knew Steve Bannon since 2011. April 12, you can't do it faster, because they're obstructing. They're obstructionists. So I have people, hundreds of people that we are trying to get through. I mean you see the backlog. We can't get them through. At this point, he had not nominated anyone for hundreds of positions. April 12, the New York Times said the word wiretapped in the headline of the first edition. Then they took it out of there fast when they realized. There were separate headlines for print and web, but neither were altered. April 12, the Secretary General and I had a productive discussion about what more NATO can do in the fight against terrorism. I complained about that a long time ago and they made a change, and now they do fight terrorism. NATO has been engaged in counter-terrorism efforts since the 1980s. April 12, Mosul was supposed to last for a week and now they've been fighting it for many months and so many more people died. The campaign was expected to take months. April 16, someone should look into who paid for the small organized rallies yesterday. The election is over. There's no evidence of paid protesters. April 18, the fake media goes, Donald Trump changed his stance on China. I haven't changed my stance. He did. April 21, on 90 planes I saved $725 million. It's actually a little bit more than that, but it's $725 million. Much of the price cuts were already projected. April 21, when WikiLeaks came out. Never heard of WikiLeaks, never heard of it. He criticized it as early as 2010. April 27, I want to help our miners while the Democrats are blocking their health care. The bill to extend health benefits for certain coal miners was introduced by a Democrat and was co-sponsored by mostly Democrats. April 28, the trade deficit with Mexico is close to $70 billion. Even with Canada it's $17 billion trade deficit with Canada. The US had an $8.1 billion trade surplus, not deficit, with Canada in 2016. April 28, she's running against someone who's going to raise your taxes to the sky, destroy your health care, and he's for open borders, lots of crime. Those are not John Ossoff's positions. April 28, the F-35 fighter jet program, it was way over budget. I've saved $725 million plus, just by getting involved in the negotiation. Much of the price cuts were planned before Trump. April 29, they're incompetent, dishonest people who after an election had to apologize because they covered it. Us, me, but all of us, they covered it so badly that they felt they were forced to apologize because their predictions were so bad. The Times did not apologize. April 29, as you know, I've been a big critic of China, and I've been talking about currency manipulation for a long time. But I have to tell you that during the election, number one, they stopped. China stopped years ago. April 29, I've already saved more than $725 million on a simple order of F-35 planes. I got involved in the negotiation. Much of the price cuts were planned before Trump. April 29th. We're also getting NATO countries to finally step up and contribute their fair share. They've begun to increase their contributions by billions of dollars, but we are not going to be satisfied until everyone pays what they owe. The deal was struck in 2014, April 29th, when they talk about currency manipulation, and I did say I would call China, if they were, a currency manipulator, early in my tenure. And then I get there. Number one, as soon as I got elected, they stopped. China stopped in 2014, April 29th. I was negotiating to reduce the price of the big fighter jet contract, the F-35, which was totally out of control. I will save billions and billions and billions of dollars. Most of the cuts were planned before Trump. April 29th. I think our side's being proven very strongly. And everybody's talking about it. There's still no evidence Trump's phones were tapped. May 1st. Well, we are protecting pre-existing conditions. And it'll be every bit as good on pre-existing conditions as Obamacare. The bill weakens protections for people with pre-existing conditions. May 1st. The F-35 fighter jet I got involved in the negotiation. It's 2,500 jets. I negotiated for 90 planes, Lot 10. I got $725 million off the price. Much of the price cuts were planned before Trump. May 1st. First of all, since I started running, they haven't increased they have not manipulated their currency. I think that was out of respect to me and the campaign. China stopped years ago. May 2nd. I love buying those planes at a reduced price. I have cut billions. I have to tell you this, and they can check, right, Martha? I have cut billions and billions of dollars off plane contracts sitting here. Much of the cost cuts were planned before Trump. May 4th. Number 2, they're actually not a currency manipulator. Since I've been talking about currency manipulation with respect to them and other countries, they stopped. China stopped years ago. May 4th. We're the highest taxed nation in the world. We're not. May 4th. Nobody cares about my tax return except for the reporters. Polls show most Americans do care. May 8th. We've gotten billions of dollars more in NATO than we're getting. All because of me. The deal was struck in 2014, May 8th, but when I did his show, which by the way was very highly rated. It was highest rating. The highest rating he's ever had. Colbert's Late Show debut had nearly 2 million more viewers. May 8th. Director Clapper reiterated what everybody, including the fake media, already knows: there is no evidence of collusion with Russia and Trump. Clapper only said he wasn't aware of an investigation. May 12th. Again, the story that there was collusion between the Russians and Trump campaign was fabricated by Dems as an excuse for losing the election. The FBI was investigating before the election. May 12th. When James Clapper himself, and virtually everyone else with knowledge of the witch hunt, says there is no collusion, when does it end? Clapper said he wouldn't have been told of an investigation into collusion. May 13th. I'm cutting the price of airplanes with Lockheed. The cost cuts were planned before he became president. May 26th. Just arrived in Italy for the G7. Trip has been very successful. We made and saved the USA many billions of dollars and millions of jobs. He's referencing an arms deal that's not enacted and other apparent deals that weren't announced on the trip. June 1st. China will be allowed to build hundreds of additional coal plants. So, we can't build the plants, but they can. According to this agreement, India will be allowed to double its coal production by 2020. The agreement doesn't allow or disallow building coal plants. June 1st. I've just returned from a trip overseas where we concluded nearly $350 billion of military and economic development for the United States, creating hundreds of thousands of jobs. Trump's figures are inflated and premature. June 4th. At least 7 dead and 48 wounded in terror attack, and Mayor of London says there is no reason to be alarmed. The mayor was specifically talking about the enlarged police presence on the streets. June 5th. The Justice Department should have stayed with the original travel ban, not the watered-down, politically correct version they submitted to SC. Trump signed this version of the travel ban, not the Justice Department. June 21st. They all say it's non-binding. Like hell it's non-binding. The Paris Climate Agreement is non-binding, and Trump said so in his speech announcing the withdrawal. June 21st. Right now, we are one of the highest taxed nations in the world. We're not. All the president's lies. January 2017. February, March, April, May, June. Inauguration. President Trump's political rise was built on a lie about Barack Obama's birthplace. His lack of truthfulness has also become central to the Russia investigation, with James Comey, the former director of the FBI, testifying under oath about Trump's lies, plain and simple. There is simply no precedent for an American president to spend so much time telling untruths. Every president has shaded the truth or told occasional whoppers. No other president, of either party, has behaved as Trump is behaving. He is trying to create an atmosphere in which reality is irrelevant. We have set a conservative standard here, leaving out many dubious statements, like the claim that his travel ban is similar to Obama administration policy. Some people may still take issue with this standard, arguing that the president wasn't speaking literally. But we believe his long pattern of using untruths to serve his purposes, as a businessman and politician, means that his statements are not simply careless errors. We are using the word lie deliberately. Not every falsehood is deliberate on Trump's part. But it would be the height of naivete to imagine he is merely making honest mistakes. He is lying. Trump told public lies or falsehoods every day for his first 40 days. The list above uses the conservative standard of demonstrably false statements. By that standard, Trump told a public lie on at least 20 of his first 40 days as president. But based on a broader standard, one that includes his many misleading statements, like exaggerating military spending in the Middle East, Trump achieved something remarkable. He said something untrue, in public, every day for the first 40 days of his presidency. The streak didn't end until March 1. January 2017 February March visited a Trump property and told no public lie or falsehood. April May June Since then, he has said something untrue on at least 74 of 113 days. On days without an untrue statement, he is often absent from Twitter, vacationing at Mar-a-Lago in Florida, or busy golfing. The end of May was another period of relative public veracity, or at least public quiet, for the president. He seems to have been otherwise occupied, dealing with internal discussions about the Russia investigation and then embarking on a trip through the Middle East and Europe. Visited a Trump property and told no public lies or falsehoods. Trump's trip overseas. Trump's public lies sometimes changed with repetition. Sometimes Trump can't even keep his untruths straight. After he reversed a campaign pledge and declined to label China a currency manipulator, he kept changing his description of when China had stopped the bad behavior. Initially, he said it stopped once he took office. He then changed the turning point to the election, then to since he started talking about it, and then to some uncertain point in the distant past.